Hello, YouTube. Um, Today I'm going to be talking about and reviewing one of my favorite comic book movies from the early 2000s, and that is The Punisher, or the Punisher movie from 2004. And as you can see at the top, yes, this is the extended cut of the film. So this movie, um, Now, this movie, I remember seeing this movie for the first time, and I remember loving it back then. I still do. In fact, to me, this is the in fact, to me, in fact, to me, this is still the best um, Punisher adaptation. I did enjoy Warzone for what it was. Obviously, it wasn't a perfect movie. The Netflix series, John Bernthal was, obviously incredible, but the first season I thought was okay at best. The second season I thought, the second season I thought was the second season I thought was a complete mess. But obviously, that's not what I'm here to talk about. But yeah, no, this is, to me, this is the best. This is still the best interpretation of the Punisher. Um, so this movie is it is an origin story, um, and um, that's really my only complaint with this movie um, is I felt like they spent a little too much time on the origin, because this movie really goes through like the entire um, backstory, like, of the Punisher up until the point, um, from the minute where his family obviously gets killed, to the minute where he finally decides to don the iconic black t-shirt with the skull, pick up the guns, and go out and do his thing. But yeah, no, this movie opens with a deal going down, or I should say an arms deal going down. Frank Castle is with the FBI, um, which, if you're familiar with the comics, if you're a comic book, if you're a comic book fanatic like I am, obviously in the comics, the Punisher was never with the FBI, but whatever. Um, but yeah, so there's an arms deal going down. Um, there's an arms deal going down, which Frank Castle is taking part in. Um, and then the deal is going down. Mickey Mickey Duka, whose character I will get into a little bit later in the review. Um, he is with the son. He is with one of the sons of Howard Saint, who I will also get into a little bit later. But anyway, so the arms deal is going down. They're doing the trade. They're making the exchange. Um, and then FBI agents show up and basically blow the whole thing open. Um, Frank Castle um, Frank Castle is shot and supposedly dies. Um, and so the basically shit hits the fan when when the FBI shows up, um and um and then we get and then they And then we get, and then we learn that Robert Saint, um, accidentally got killed. I'll get into that in a minute. But so they bring Frank Castle. Sorry, I can't talk today. So they bring Frank Castle back to the FBI station, and there we learn that basically the whole thing was a drill. It was never, nobody was supposed to die out there. It was just basically a drill. And so the FBI, has no idea, who the kid is that they just accidentally killed. The bullets that Frank and everybody else was shot with were fake. Again, it was, it was a test. It wasn't supposed to, nobody was supposed to die out there. As Frank says, when he gets back to the station, he's like, "This isn't football." He says to one of his guys, he's like, "This isn't football." And he's like, "It's a figure of speech." And he's like, "Ugh, no one was supposed to die out there." And so he gets back, and then that point in the movie, we learn that Frank Castle is retiring from the FBI. Everybody wishes him well. Everybody is wishing him well. His buddy and best friend, who Frank is saying, Frank is saying a goodbye to. Someone else comes over and IDs. Turns out that they've ID'd the kid that they accidentally killed is Howard Saint's son. And Howard Saint is, he is the main bad guy in this movie. As far as I know, he's not from any of the comics. He's not. The Saints are not from any of the comics, as far as I know. If you're a comic book fan, if you're a comic book fan, and if you're watching this, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Leave a comment, but I'm pretty sure that they aren't. Again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so they've ID'd him, and then Frank Castle goes home to his family. He goes home to his family, where we learn that they are moving. Frank Castle and his family are moving again. They've apparently, in the movie, we learn that they've been moving a lot. We're not really sure why. But he and his family are moving to London. Where Frank is under the impression that it's a safe place where he and his family, can all be together. His son, again, if you're familiar with the comics, Frank had a son and a daughter. However, in this movie, he just had a son. So that was another thing that they sort of changed. But, so his son goes, "So why London?" And Frank's like, "London's a safe place where we can all be together. No more moving around, I promise." And, so they're moving to London, and then, eventually Howard Saint learns of the death of his youngest son, that being Robert. Howard Saint is with Howard Saint goes to the morgue to see his son, to identify his son's body. An FBI agent is there saying, he and Howard Saint starts asking questions about about Otto Krieg, who who Frank Castle at the beginning of the movie was using as like an alias, because obviously, he wasn't about to use his real name, so he was going under the alias of Otto Krieg in the beginning of the movie, and Howard Saint starts asking questions to this agent, is saying, who is Otto Krieg? Who are the people who work for him? Who are his friends? Who would who would benefit from who would benefit from something like this, and um and so Howard Saint does some, obviously, he starts doing some investigating, illegal, obviously, and he starts asking around, and him and his men, um, um, he has a conversation with his best friend, saying, we called Europe, we called Washington and Hong Kong, um, um, so he and his mom, so they placed a bunch of phone calls around, all the different areas that Frank Castle has been. And he goes, soon we'll know everything there is to know about Otto Krieg within 24 hours. And so, so then we learn that Frank Castle is having a family reunion in Puerto Rico. And, and it is there that Howard Saint and his men, we get a scene of Howard Saint's buddy, Quentin Glass, who is the family lawyer, who is like the family lawyer, consigliere, um, you name it. He hands him a file on Frank Castle, and he's going through all the information on him. Um, he he hands him the file and says, his name is Frank Castle. Senior agent, just got to Bureau's London desk. His alias, connections, apartments in Europe, none of it was real, not even his death. So so the scene that I told you about at the beginning of the movie, where he supposedly died, that's what they're referring to. So they stage, so as a so for revenge against Frank Castle, he has, they stage his they stage his and his family's demise. They go to Puerto Rico and they kill Frank Castle's entire family, his wife, his son, everybody. And it's at that point, and um, and and they kill his entire family. Frank, obviously, tries to get to, tries to get to, his family, but he, obviously, that they kill his family, that they torture the living shit out of Frank Castle. And then they torture him, and then they leave him for dead. They torture him, and then they leave him for dead. Um, and then it's and then the Candelaria, who lives on an island way off the point, he finds Castle, and basically, and nurses him back to health and takes care of him. Um, and he um, he nurses him back to health. He takes care of him, and finally, when he's recovered and he's able, to, um, when he's back on his feet, he visits the gun shop. His father, Frank's father, had like a little, in like a shed, almost like a shed, in like a little hut or whatever. He had a, well, I shouldn't say a hut, but it was like a little, I don't know how to describe it. I guess you could call it like a little shed, or a just like a small area, um, where he kept like his guns, and stuff like that. Um, he goes into that room. He's looking at a picture of his wife and son, and um, he's looking at a picture of his wife and son, and then he makes a fist and smashes um, the glass, and picks up one of his father's pistols. And it's at that point, where he decides it's at that point where where Frank realizes, well, nothing, um, much like the comics, nobody's gonna do anything about this. Nobody's gonna, um, basically realizing, if I want justice, I'm gonna have to get it myself. So, so he wraps up, his father's guns. He takes them, um, and then something else I forgot to mention. Um, something else I forgot to mention, but I'm going to bring it up now. Um, his son had given him, before the day before, the morning, before they died. His son went into town and got him the iconic, Punisher T-shirt that you see everywhere, with the, with the skull on it. Um, and he found it in the sand. He finds it in the sand, and he opens it up, and he holds it up, and he decides at the and he takes it, and he decides, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. So he moves to, oh, I'm sorry, I completely forgot to tell you where the movie takes place. The movie is set in, downtown Tampa. In the comic books, obviously it's New York, but in the movie it's in Tampa. Um, so Frank moves to, like a little apartment. He moves to, like a little apartment, and he gets everything all set up, like his guns, all his different weapons, um, all of his different weapons, um, all of his different weapons. And he decides, um, at that point, he decides, yeah, I'm, I'm gonna do this. Um, this movie is very much about, it is about justice, but it's very much about, the character of the Punisher has always been, like taking the law into your own hands. Um, when the character of the Punisher has always been about, taking the law into your own hands, because there's nobody else out there, willing to help you. It's like, nobody, you were promised one thing, you were given another. And, and because of that, and, because, the normal justice system, um, failed, he decides, he decides, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be the one to, to avenge my family, um, and to avenge, their deaths, and make sure, that, what happened to me doesn't happen to, any other, you know, um, innocent person ever again. Um, the Punisher is, um, like his ethics, his moral code, or his moral code. It isn't something that, um, it isn't something, that a lot, it isn't something, that, um, it isn't something, it's not, it isn't something that's, that's normal. It isn't, like, obviously, it obviously isn't something that you would ever see, like Spider-Man do or Superman do, or, um, you know, or like Captain America, um, um, i- any, the Flash, Nightwing, Daredevil. They, obviously, like none of them kill people, you know, and, which is why usually when the Punisher shows up in, um, usually, when other heroes, are featured in Punisher stories, usually they are, usually, he ends up going, he usually ends up going up against them because um, because they don't agree with, with his methods and his, um, his way of doing things. Um, and, um, but yeah, this movie, like I said before, I feel like it spent a little too much time on the origin. Um, this movie, like I said before, it takes you, from the minute to where he is, FBI, to the minute where, um, to the minute where they show him, with his family, and the minute where, um, where his family gets killed, and he finally decides, that he's going to be the one, to do something about it. But however, but there is still a lot, like even then, um, like even then, like even when you see him going out there and doing, Punisher type things, um, he's still not the Punisher yet, because he's not, um, he hasn't, like started calling himself the Punisher yet. And, like a lot, like everybody in this movie pretty much refers to him as Frank Castle, um, throughout the movie. Even though he is wearing, the t-shirt, and, he's got the guns and the long, and the long coat and everything else. Um, but yeah, no. And then he eventually, the Punisher comes up with a plan, to take them all out, to take everybody out. And he teams up with Mickey Duka, who is a um, who is who works with, Howard Saint, Howard Saint, um, and, so he comes up with a plan to basically, um, to basically all, to basically, turn them all against one another. Like one point in the movie, um, like one point, like at one point in the movie, um, like at one point in the movie, the Punisher stages, to make it look like that Howard's wife and his best friend slept together. Even though they didn't. She was happily married to Howard, and Quentin was gay. However, um, however, but, since they were obviously both involved, in his family's murder, the Punisher is obviously going, the Punisher is obviously going, to want them, out of the picture. So he stages that and makes it look like that they slept together. Um, and they're watching, it's like, it's basically an eye for an eye. The Punisher, Howard Saint, Howard Saint, took everything um, from Frank, everything, that ever mattered to him. So, um, so because of that, the Punisher is basically doing the same, and he's just slowly taking, everything that matters to, um, everything that matters to Howard Saint, and everything that matters to Howard Saint, and not just, like he's not just, he's not just taking like his men out, like he is disassembling, um, like his, um, at one point, in the movie, um, like you not, like you don't just, like if you want to hurt somebody, like if you want to hurt, the best way to hurt, someone like Howard Saint is to go after his money, because obviously he's a very, very powerful guy, right? He's got lots and lots of money. So at one point in the movie, um, he goes to Howard Saint's building where his money is being processed, um, and um, he has his men. He has Howard Saint's. Remember, anybody that the Punisher kills in this movie obviously works for Howard Saint. The Punisher's, it's very, very black and white with the Punisher. If you're guilty, that's it. You're dead. If you're, he um he defends the innocent, but if you're guilty, that's it. There's no warning, that there's no nothing. You're dead. And um there's no warning, there's no warning, that's it. He will show no mercy if you are guilty. Um so um he goes to like I said before, the place where his money is being processed. Um and I actually thought that this was kind of funny. Um he has his men, he has two of Howard's guys, wheel, like an entire thing of money over to a window, and he basically tells them, he's like, now out the window. And he has Howard Saint's guys, literally throw like all of Howard's money like out the window. And there's one scene where it literally starts like raining, like $100 bills. And you have like everybody and their mother out in the streets, obviously, like taking like all the, like every piece that they can get their hands on. See, the difference between an anti-hero and a villain is an anti-hero will do, um you know a villain obviously doesn't have, um you know a villain doesn't have a villain doesn't live by a set of rules like the Joker. Like the Joker is just pure chaos. Like he just genuinely like does not care, right? Like if you watch, like Heath Ledger's performance in The Dark Knight, right? Like he is just pure chaos. Like he is just pure evil. Frank Castle, um, the Punisher, yes, yes, murder is bad, and yes, he's murdering people, but he's not killing anyone who doesn't deserve it. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't, um, like he's not killing anybody who doesn't, um, he's not killing anybody, who's going to be missed. Like um, he's not just going up to, like random people in the street that have, like wives and children and loved ones, and just, like mowing them down. Like he's going after people who prey on the innocent, who prey on people, who prey on, innocent people who hurt, you, who hurt people who don't deserve it. And, um, and that is, it's not, I mean, obviously, yes, it's still murder, it's still bad, but again, he's not, um, but he's still living by a set of rules. Look at it this way. He's doing bad things, but for a good cause. And um, an anti-hero does. That's the difference between an anti-hero and a villain. Yes, it's not, um, yes, again, it's obviously not something that, Spider-Man would do or Superman would do or whatever, but that's, that is, um, that's who, that's who Frank Castle is. And, um, and the movie is, there aren't too many comic book films out there that stay true to, that stay true to the source material. This movie, um, despite the change in like the setting, and him being, an FBI agent at the beginning, um, there is a, um, there's a lot of scenes, in this movie that are taken right out of the comics. Um, hang on, hold on, let me show you something. Um, like Punisher Year One is one of the inspirations, for the 2004 movie. And this, um, the ending of, the ending of Year One, the ending of Year One is actually in the, is actually in the movie. Um, so here we have, like, if you look here, this is towards the end of the book right here, but, this scene that I'm about to show you is literally taken right out of the, right out of the page. Like it's like the way they did this scene in the movie. It's literally a perfect, frame by frame recreation. So this scene here, you have, um, him sending up a bottle of champagne with a bomb in it, and then, um, and then he, and then there's like a party going on here, and then, and then he takes out the bottle, and then boom, and then the bomb goes off. That, um, and then obviously, the Punisher comes busting in and, starts taking guys out. That scene, that scene in the movie is is like a perfect example of, of like a frame by frame recreation, taken literally like right out of the page. And it was just it, and there's there's a lot of scenes in the movie like that. Like um, there's another one of, hang on, let me see if I can find it. There's another one of, there's another one here. There's another one here of, there's another shot here of, there's a scene in the movie when, there's a scene in the movie when the Punisher captures, Mickey Duka, and basically starts torturing him for, trying to get, information, out of him about the Saints. Um, you have a it's actually kind of a funny scene. You have the Punisher literally torturing Mickey with a popsicle, and and then on the and then yeah, like here, and like even like a lot of the dialogue, like some of the dialogue in the movie is literally taken like word for word out of the out of the book, and and so like um so like you see here, he's going in for he's going in his freezer, um and then he's got the blowtorch, and and then he's got the blowtorch, and I know you can't really see it here, but what he's doing here is actually he's frying a piece of meat as he's torturing Mickey with the popsicle, which is exactly what happens in the movie. I shit you not. Like in the movie, he literally has Mickey like hanging upside down. He literally, literally like it's just like it is in the comic. He has him like hanging upside down, and he's torturing him with a popsicle, and and yeah, no, that's but yeah, no, this movie, I mean, literally, like it's despite like some minor changes, like here and there, it's literally, it's just like the comics. I mean, a lot of the um most of the movie though was based on a comic series called Welcome Back, Frank, which was I think it was like the early 2000s. It was a mini series written by Garth Ennis, and let me hang on, guys. Yep, and it was this is another comic book movie that's very, very grounded in the real world. There's pretty much no science fiction in it. It's very, very grounded in like the real world, and the world that the Punisher lives in is, I think, something that is something that at times we can all relate to. Like it's the justice system is just so corrupt, and so and like the world that he lives in is it's just so like dirty, and it's just filled with crime and corruption, um and even like a lot of the there's so much there's so much to love about this movie, especially if you're especially if you're a comic book fan. Like like everything, from like the characters, anybody who has read Welcome Back, Frank are obviously going to know who these characters are, but like Bumpo is in it, Dave is in it, Joan is in it. It's very, very it's very much a love letter to comic book fans, and and comic book lovers, and like one of my favorite scenes in the was and they perfectly recreated it in the movie, is the fight with the Russian. is the fight with the Russian. And so like in this page here, we meet the Punisher meets the Russian, and you have, and this is literally all in the movie. The only difference is that in the movie, the Russian, for whatever reason, doesn't talk, whereas in the comic book he did. But yeah, no, there's so much. I mean, like, it's literally it's literally like a frame by frame. There's so much there's so many frame by frame recreations in this movie that they just literally like pulled like right out of the books. I mean, this is this is the way comic book film should be done. I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying I'm not saying that, that I have a problem, like when they do change things, because obviously sometimes, you need to, because, there are obviously times where, what happened, what works in comics obviously always doesn't work in live action. But yeah, but this movie is, I mean, there's so much to love about this movie. And I remember actually hearing that Thomas Jane, when he was first cast to the role, he wasn't originally a comic book fan, but when he was cast, he started doing, like the research and everything, he very quickly became a fan of the of the character. And he and Thomas Jane, he Thomas Jane, I think I think was, I mean, like, he was perfect for this. I mean, he really had he really stayed true to the classic classic Punisher from like the early 2000s to when was this made? Okay, yeah, to the early 2000s to the 90s. And it's just an incredible it's just an incredible take on the character, and really gives it really does justice to fans of the character. And it's really how he should be done. It's really how he should be done. This movie is really just a love letter for the fans, despite, as I said before, despite, some changes here and there. It's so incredible. Another thing I want to bring up before I end this review is actually, no, a couple things. One of them being, there's a really dark moment in this movie, and that is the Punisher finally, Frank Castle finally finds out who I know this is spoilers, but if you're watching, I apologize, but I feel like that this is really important to bring up. I feel like this is really important to bring up because it led to it led to, like why the Punisher's family was murdered, and how Howard Saint was able to obtain the information and stuff like that. His best friend, Frank's best friend, in the FBI, he also served. They also served together in the war. They don't actually. If you're familiar with the Punisher, you know that he was a war hero in the comics. They don't show that, though. They do have pictures and stuff like that do reference that. So there's a point in the movie where his buddy, from the FBI, Jimmy Weeks, they have interactions together throughout the movie. However, he finds out later on that his best friend, his best friend was indeed the person who set him up. Who gave him up. Howard Saint asked, Jimmy Weeks, he comes to him again at one point in the movie and says, Otto, he says to him, I'm going to ask you again, Otto Krieg. And Jimmy Weeks says that's not his name. And he gives him up. And he's the one, who gave him up. So he goes to confront, so later on in the movie, Frank goes to confront him, and, he goes to confront him, and he goes to confront him, about, obviously about what he did. And this is, and he goes to confront him and literally makes him kill himself. This is a really, really dark scene because, not just of, what that scene, what that scene shows, but also it shows you what kind of person, Frank Castle has turned into, like the lengths he has gone to avenge, his family, and, the lengths that he has gone to avenge, his family and take out, those who have, who wronged him. And that is, and like I said, that is a very, very dark scene. That is a very, very, that is a very, very dark scene, and it's a very, it's a very, and it also says a lot about, and I think it also says a lot about who, Jimmy Weeks was, like the fact that he was just willing to give up, his best friend so quickly. Because I know that if I were, if I was in that position, like I would never do that. I mean, I would, I would never give up. If I was in that position, I would be like, I'm not doing that. But yeah, no, that, and then another thing I want to bring up is, I said before that this movie, that I felt that this movie spent too much time on the origin. It's finally at the end of the last shot of the movie is him saying, Frank Castle is dead. Call me the Punisher. And this is just me. I love this movie. I still think it's I still think it's the best, interpretation of of the character. But I really feel like that they could have, that they could have spent less time, on the origin. I feel like that they could have, like shrunk down that, they could have shrunk down, the origin story a little bit. Maybe like, like the second half of the movie, he could have been embracing, he could have start calling him, he could have start, he could have start, calling himself the Punisher, and then, they could have had him, going around and, um, they could have, basically he could have, and at that point, I feel like they could have been like, okay, he's the Punisher now, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, but yeah, no, if you guys haven't seen this, um, whether you're a longtime Punisher fan, or you're, um, or better yet, if you have no idea who the Punisher is, I very, 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 very highly recommend this, um, because this is definitely one of the best early, um, comic book films. And like I said before, I really do think that this is still the, I really do think that this is still the definitive Punisher movie. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Have you seen it? Did you like it? Like, subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace.